Well, hello, everybody. We might as well get started. So first of all, welcome. My name is Nicole Balston. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator at the Beaty Museum, and you'll hear my voice throughout today's live stream. As we get started today, I'd like to point out a few features on how to connect with us. If you're joining on Zoom, please feel free to use the chat features, especially if you're having any issues in Zoom with audio and video. We can do our best to help you. On the bottom center of your screen, you'll see Q&A where you can post questions to the speakers and vote and comment on other questions. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, hello. You can use the comments section on the video and we'll check both places. We are trying out a few new things today, so thank you for bearing with us, including closed captioning. The Beaty Biodiversity Museum is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. We thank the Musqueam for their ongoing partnership with the museum in furthering our understanding of culturally diverse ways of knowing our world. Today, we celebrate the Beaty Museum's 10th public anniversary. In person, we've had admission by donation all day, and now we're excited to celebrate virtually together. Over the next hour, you can expect us to have a short museum tour together with two of our interpreters, Sheila and Vincent, chat with one of our curators, Dr. Wayne Maddison, and meet our director, Dr. Quentin Cronk. Please ask questions along the way. We've produced a celebration video that premieres today throughout the program. To celebrate our first 10 years as a public museum, enjoy a selection of memories and visions shared by museum staff, our friends, and supporters. In our first clip, we're joined by Dr. Santa J. Ono, President and Vice Chancellor at UBC.
For 10 years now, the Beaty Biodiversity Museum has been welcoming thousands of families, school children, and researchers to the University of British Columbia each year. The Beaty Biodiversity Museum is the centerpiece of biodiversity research and outreach at UBC. Its unique collections invite visitors to interact with the riches of nature and arouse their sense of wonder and fascination by exploring its vast natural history collections. The museum is a vital resource for undergraduate students to tangibly engage with what they learn in textbooks. And it is the starting point for impactful collections-based research that is global in scope. Understanding and improving our relationship to other living things on this planet is of critical importance. As the public face of the UBC Biodiversity Research Center, the Beaty Biodiversity Museum promotes a better understanding of the diversity of life on Earth and the vital need to preserve it.
Thank you for all celebrating with us today. So I'm first joined by Sheila, museum interpreter at the head of the whale. So I'm thrilled to have her with us today, and I'm going to get her video featured and ready to go. Sheila, whenever you're ready, you can take it away. Fabulous. I see.
Hello,
very nice.
And welcome everyone to the Beaty Biodiversity Museum on the Vancouver campus at UBC. My name is Sheila Byers, and I am a museum interpreter at the Beaty, although my relationship with the Beaty started some 10 years ago as a volunteer. So it is my great pleasure actually to welcome you to help us celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Beaty Biodiversity Museum, because on this date, October 16th, in 2010, the public was officially invited to the opening of this museum. So prior to this time, the research specimens have been at many locations all over the campus, and it was determined that the best thing to do was to move everything into one location. And of course, that was here at the Beaty. Many of these specimens are well over several hundred years in age, some dating back to the late 1890s. So having them in one location meant that there was an opportunity to have much better collection care. So in addition to that, and sorry, I'm losing my mask. In addition to that, it was a the idea of the museum was to create a collaborative space for researchers, for students, and of course for the public. And that idea was so that we could share, learn, connect, and enjoy the diversity and beauty of the specimens that we have here. So we have had hundreds of thousands of visitors to the museum in the past 10 years, as well as thousands of groups and hundreds of volunteers who have interacted with the specimens here. So thinking of the interactions, you can hopefully see the big blue whale here. Largest animal ever in the world. So I want to mention just a few little ideas here for you to think about. Largest animal ever, and as with other whales, when they die naturally, they fall to the bottom of the ocean. And that's when we call them, that's when we call them a whale fall. Now, as a marine biologist, I specialize in worms. And in 2002, there was a worm discovered on bones of a whale fall at 3,000 meters deep. And it took some time, but they learned that that worm actually devoured the bones of the skeleton of that whale. And as a consequence, the name of the worm is the bone-eating worm. And if you think about it, most whales die naturally, fall to the bottom of the ocean, become a whale fall, but they also become a huge source of food for sharks and fish, other fish, crabs, anemones, snails even. And they devour all of that flesh, all of the blubber, but the skeleton remains. And it's these little worms that are moved through the ocean bottom by current and, by the current and land on the skeleton, actually devour those bones. So you have the connectedness of the largest whale and a very tiny worm, we're talking about this size, who helps to recycle that entire skeleton. So there is the interconnectedness between something that lives primarily on the surface of the ocean, top 100 or 200 meters, and then an interaction with something that lives at depths of 3,000 meters, and all of the other interactions with those animals that then relied on that food supply. So incredible connections between organisms and incredible importance of biodiversity for all of those interactions. So speaking of interactions, we are going to turn this over to Vincent, who is down in the museum and will talk to you about a few more stories and show you more specimens there. Thank you very much for coming to help us celebrate.
Thank you so much, Sheila. It was so great to see you in front of the whale. Before we throw it to Vincent, I'm going to share the next clip of our video. And this one is featuring our vision for the future. So I'm pretty excited to share this clip with you, and we will get started.
The Beaty Biodiversity Museum celebrates the achievements of its faculty and staff and the quality of the projects they continue to develop. Now, what of the future? And how do we build on an amazing first 10 years? How do we take the Beaty Biodiversity Museum to the next level? And what does that look like? I think it looks like a global biodiversity research institute that is making waves in ongoing global crises, such as climate change, biodiversity loss, and conservation. In the coming years, the Beaty Biodiversity Museum will be a place to gather minds, to exchange ideas,
to preserve the collection well into the future, To inspire creativity.
To challenge ideas.
To reach more and more people.
To connect and engage with our community.
To be accessible and open.
To support innovation.
To be a place of hope for the future of biodiversity.
Oh, what a great addition. So excited to be able to share this video with everybody today and see so many familiar faces, even though we can't be in person together. Vincent, I'm curious, how's the setup going in the museum so far? All right, I think we'll take a minute. So I'm curious, does anyone have any questions about the museum? I had some lovely comments in the chat saying that it's so nice to see everybody. It's been a while. We've got friends from all over the place, Vancouver, Alberta, and a few other places, I'm fairly certain. So thank you all for joining us today. And I see some past volunteers, staff. It is really lovely to have you with us today. Vincent, how's it going downstairs?
We're doing all right.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to turn your video on and then I will turn it to you.
All right. So hello there, Vincent here. I am on the museum floor. As you can see above me is, of course, Big Blue, our Big Blue skeleton. Now, I wanted to show you a few more of the amazing specimens and amazing stories we have in our museum. So we heard all about Big Blue. She's amazing. Of our 10 years of being open as the Beaty Biodiversity Museum, we of course often will refer to ourselves, the place with the big whale skeleton. Now, she's impressive, but we've got a lot of other very impressive specimens. For example, this here is what we affectionately call Stumpy. This is a piece of wood from a Western red cedar, one of our local species of trees. This tree is quite a lot older when it died than our museum. It was over 700 years old. And while the blue whale is the largest animal in the world, I do want to point out Western red cedars can grow to 70 meters long. That's more than twice as tall as a blue whale is long. And that's not even the biggest of all the trees. Now, of course, our museum is filled with many amazing collections with all kinds of different specimens. Things like tetrapods are four-legged vertebrates and their descendants. We have invertebrates, we have our plant collection and the herbarium, and more. And just to remember everything we've been through for these last 10 years as our museum has continued to grow, we have recollections. This amazing gallery is filled with art from different people, researchers, PhD students, curators, all people who have been involved with the museum and their amazing art they've made inspired by life here at the museum. So if you ever get a chance to visit us in person, definitely check out Recollections, looking back at the 10 years of the Beaty Biodiversity Museum. Now, I want to show a little bit more of our collections. Here you'll see our wide cabinets. These amazing cabinets are filled with all kinds of specimens. This section here is actually our Victorian collection. So these are donations from folks, collections that were made during the Victorian era. So these specimens are over a century old, and they tell an amazing story. Now, there's one specimen that I'm a big fan of, and it is actually one of our birds in our collection. Yes, we've got a lot of amazing birds, and I recommend if you get a chance to check them all out. But I want to talk about that one there, the one in the tuxedo. That is, of course, a penguin. In this case, we have our emperor penguin, the biggest of the penguins. Now, penguins are a famous bird because, well, look at them. They don't look like all the other birds. So what's fascinating about the penguin is they have over many, many, many years adapted to a life aquatic. Think about it, they're kind of like the whale. They come from a group of animals that have adapted to a different kind of life. The whale is a mammal. Most mammals walk on land. The birds can walk and fly, but the penguin has adapted to life aquatic. I always find it quite interesting that the ancestor of the tetrapods would have been a fish-like animal, that adapted it over many generations to walk on land. And then you have the dinosaurs and some of their descendants, the birds who could fly. And then you have this bird that has returned to life in the ocean. And the ocean, of course, is teeming with life, as evident in our marine invertebrate collection. This amazing collection doesn't even begin to touch the diversity of life you can find in the ocean of animals with no backbone. In fact, most life would be considered marine invertebrates. And also, of course, check out some of these amazing stories of our recollections of people's memories throughout our museum's 10-year history. You can see more of these stories also online on our social media. And as we turn the corner and we enter some of our different collections, here we have the beginning of our plant collection. And the plant collection is very diverse, covering everything from algae to vascular plants, land, so those are like the land plants, the gymnosperms, and the flowering plants, all sorts of amazing plants. But I do want to take a step back into our animal kingdom for a moment to look at this here. This is a fossil of a coelacanth. Now, what is a coelacanth? Well, the coelacanth is a kind of fish. And in fact, it belongs to a group called the lobe-finned fish. Most of the fish you might be familiar with are ray-finned fish. The lobe-finned fish just have kind of more limb-like fins. And one of the lobe-finned fish is actually the ancestor of the tetrapods. So that's the mammals, the birds, the reptiles, the amphibians. And fun story about the coelacanth, we find them in fossils millions of years old, and people thought they were extinct. Although in the 1900s, they actually found some living ones, and it turns out they were still alive. So as we take a step through our amazing herbarium, you can see more of the amazing stories. Here you can see some of our amazing work in partnership with the Museum of Anthropology and several First Nations cultural groups, as we have a chance to learn more about how humans, our First Nations here in Canada, interact with the nature around us. You can also check out, we have amazing programs on our website if you want to take a look to learn more. As we continue through our plant collection, this amazing collection houses some specimens that were started over a century ago. So the museum has been open for 10 years. The collections themselves have been going on for over a century. As we turn the corner, we enter this one row here, which is our entomology collection, so our insect collection and their relatives, like arachnids. But there's a lot in here because, well, with smaller specimens, you can put quite a lot per row. Now, when it comes to biodiversity, the diversity of life, the variety, the amazing changes we see in life, I think beetles are a great example of this story. The creator has an inordinate fondness for beetles. Beetles are the most diverse order of animals. Of the 2 million species described, about half of those are insects, and about 300,000 are beetles. So this amazing group has adapted so many different strategies for surviving on Earth. Now, they all have the classic insect body, 6 legs, 3 body parts, those antennae. And they have a few things in common with other beetles. They all have 4 wings, 2 of which form that hard armor. But after that, well, they've adapted in so many ways. Some of them are predators, like our humble ladybug eats aphids. Some of these here are ones that eat plants. Some eat, well, dung, like the dung beetle. And here at the museum, behind the scenes, we actually use some domestic beetles, which feed on decaying flesh. And we use those to clean up our skeletons that you will have seen in other parts of the museum. So as we walk through our fish collection, you'll see the amazing variety of fish. And I'd be remiss to not remind you that, well, we descend from a lobe-finned fish. So really, we're just one of the fancy fish. Now, speaking of fancy fish, a fish that will always be mentioned anytime you take a visit of UBC's collections we have sticklebacks. Now, sticklebacks are a fish that I personally didn't know too much about, but it turns out they're one of the most important fish in UBC research. These amazing fish have adapted to lakes here in BC, and in the last 12,000 or so years seem to have speciated. And our scientists here have actually studied their genome and sequenced it, and they're sort of BC's finches, like Darwin's amazing finches, as we get a chance to deeper understand evolution and how quickly it occurs. Now, speaking of evolution over time, I wanted to bring us to something from the past. Something a lot of people might know about from the past. Of course, I'm talking about dinosaurs. So here we look at some of our dinosaur trackways. So these casts were taken from here in British Columbia, just deeper in the interior, and these are footprints that dinosaurs made millions of years ago that were preserved and then fossilized. They give us an amazing look at what Earth was like before. So once again, going much further back in time than our museum's amazing 10 years. So these footprints here were made by dinosaurs walking across BC. Now, of course, BC looked very different back then. And well, we had these dinosaurs walking. So the leftmost, you'll see the pathways of an ankylosaur or an ankylosaur. Still not sure how to pronounce that one. That's a quadrupedal dinosaur. And on the right, we have some from a theropod. So these are the sort of the T-Rex or raptor-like ones. And in the middle, walking down, we have probably a duck-billed dinosaur of sort. And then going from right to left, we have another theropod, something like a Tyrannosaurus rex. Now, what's really cool about these trackways, well, I mean, aside from everything, is who discovered them. It was actually two young children in Tumbler Ridge who were going tubing, and then they saw footprints. Due to the way the Earth's plates have moved and changed, these footprints, which had been buried for millions of years, were sticking out of the ground. And these young children saw them and said, hey, look, dinosaurs. So I think it's a really cool example of how we're all connected to this Earth, and we all can be scientists learning a little bit more about the world around us. Now, once again, we've had this wonderful privilege to be the Beaty Museum, open for 10 years now, as we have a chance to learn more and more about all the amazing life we have here. And I wanted to thank you as you joined me on a quick little tour of the museum, looking at some of the stories, some of the specimens in here. And again, there's a lot in here. There's about 2 million specimens throughout our collections, from as big as the blue whale to as small as a flea. So I want to thank you for joining me as we got a chance to look at some of them. And if you ever get the chance to join us, whether in person at the museum or joining one of our other virtual tours online, I highly recommend you get a chance to learn and meet more of the amazing specimens in our collection. So I want to thank you for joining me for this tour. I'm going to pass the time over back to Nicole as we continue our 10-year anniversary celebration.
Thanks so much, Vincent. Before you sign off the audio, I just wanted to share a couple of comments from everybody. Just another person saying they're here from Woodstock, Ontario. Love for the Beatles, Pacific seaweeds, always loving the trackways and good fossils. Derek complimented you on your tricky camera work. Great job. Thanks for the walk and talk tour, and lots of thank yous. So we really appreciate going on a tour with you, Vincent, even though we can't be together in person. So I'm going to share the next clip of our anniversary video. And before we do that, Vincent showed at the beginning of his tour that we are featuring recollections, creative works from past and present staff, students, researchers, and volunteers of the Beaty Biodiversity Museum and the Biodiversity Research Center. And I know that there are several contributors to this exhibition who are joining us today. So thank you so much for submitting your work. And it's been really lovely to see it on the wall. I know I've gotten a little emotional reflecting on the last 10 years, so that has been really lovely. Our next clip features our exhibition collaborations, learning a little bit more about the work behind our exhibits.
Over the last 10 years, the exhibits program at the museum has expanded significantly, and we're very proud of and honored by the numerous collaborations that we've been a part of over this time. We built a close partnership with the Biodiversity Research Centre, highlighting and communicating the valuable biodiversity research that they conduct, and sharing this with our local community through physical exhibits and an extended community through digital initiatives, such as our Researchers Revealed video series. Many of our feature exhibitions have resulted from and in close collaboration with local artists, and their works have shared their different perspectives on biodiversity, engaging visitors with varied perspectives in the world around us.
The museum has developed meaningful collaborations with Musqueam and other First Nations communities to showcase Indigenous perspectives on biodiversity.
These relationships have resulted in thought-provoking and groundbreaking exhibitions, such as the Sturgeon Harpoon Knowledge Web, which has been recognised by the British Columbia Museums Association Innovation Award and the Governor-General's History Award for Excellence in Museums.
Wonderful. So for our next segment, I'm joined by Sheila in the Discovery Lab and Dr. Wayne Maddison. So Sheila, I'm going to turn it to you and Wayne. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, and welcome back, everyone. I'm so pleased to have with us today Dr. Wayne Maddison, who is the director of the Spencer Entomological Collection, who will join us for a few moments now. He has been the director when we opened back in 2020, so it's a thrill to actually have you, Wayne. Good, I see you coming on there. How are we doing? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It turns out that I'm hoping I can get on through two devices. So Nicole, if you could enable me, the other me that shows up under panelists, then I think we'll be set.
Absolutely, I will do that. Just one moment. Thanks, Wayne.
Okay, so this is the me we'll use, I think, for the big me. Okay.
Okay.
Are we good?
Yes.
I think you're good.
So I will start with one question for you, Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
There you are. Yes, good. Okay. So maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do at the museum at UBC.
What I do at the museum, I am an evolutionary biologist and I study spider diversity. So the spider collection is critical for me to be the source of many specimens to look at in terms of the details, where they're from, how they're different from different species and so forth. So I do a lot of work on the jumping spiders of the world.
Lovely. Okay. So thinking back to before the museum actually opened, and of course it would all have been very new for everyone, what were you the most excited about in terms of the public side of the museum?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because the science side of it, to a certain extent, was a ramping up of something that had been continuing for decades, but the public side was completely new. So I suppose I would say that two things that are closely connected. One is that there is so much here at UBC in terms of biodiversity research that I think most people had no clue about, and some of it is embodied in the collections themselves. It's a record of the research that had been done for the previous century. And so just to tell the public, oh my gosh, look what we have. These collections are amazing, and here they are, and you can share in them too. That opportunity was just amazing. But the other was also just the biodiversity researchers, including both the ones that use the collections and ones that do field work or do theoretical work, because UBC has arguably one of the top 10 groups in the entire world in terms of biodiversity science. So it's a great opportunity to showcase to the public what UBC is broadly in terms of biodiversity research.
Right. And of course, biodiversity has become a very more commonly used term, I think we could say, or term. And I think with this sort of collections in the museum, it's been a great opportunity to be able to give the public a better idea of that research on a more one-on-one basis. At least that's sort of what I find the museum very positive in doing.
Yeah, I think it's great that it's a point of contact between the researchers as people and the public. I think it's wonderful.
Yes, exactly. And I think most of the visitors that come through are really enjoying to get that level of information that they just have not been made aware of in the past. Okay, so what then are some of the significant milestones you've seen the museum reach over the last 10 years?
Well, there's been so much development on so many fronts, from the public programs to the educational programs. The exhibits have continued to grow. The sort of the how we work behind the scenes in terms of the protocols of the curation and so forth. I don't know that there was any moment where I would say, oh my gosh, this was a true watershed moment, because there was so much growth in so many aspects. I think that for me, like each one of us, in other words, is going to have something that we've really paid attention to. For me, it was actually taking the thousands of specimens that I've gathered over the years and actually putting them into the cabinets downstairs. That like, okay, they're set for 100 years or more. And that was a great feeling.
Exactly. And actually, I should comment on the schematic that you have of your spiders and various parts of spiders that's been included in the recollections display or exhibition. I think that's awesome. Yes. So, and of course, that's something that you would be working on all the time in terms of describing new species.
That's right. Yeah. In fact, I'm in the middle of a project now to do such things. So yeah.
Do you have a few specimens that you could show us?
I do, actually. This is sort of like, oh, can't do that. Yeah, no, so I actually have been, there's a specimen that I was, we'll do this. Oh, we can do this now. Yeah, I'll do a little bit now that you've got me highlighted there. Just a minute. Okay, so presumably you can see me on this other one, and I am going to flip here to show you. There's a little jumping spider. It's about the size of the zebra spider. It's about the size of the zebra spider. That, as long as you're seeing the right thing, everybody's seeing the right one, not my face, but seeing the spider. Good.
Yep, we see the spider.
Good. So it's about the size of the zebra spider that you see jumping on your house, and it's in the same family. But this family of jumping spiders has about 6,000 species we've discovered so far. And this is a species that's new. There are actually quite a few new spiders out there. This is one that I collected in 2007 from Gabon, from Waka National Park. And this is the little tube it was in, and there's the spider. And we're just going to see how well this works. There is the spider down there. It's a little pickled spider. What can you say? Pickled spiders look like pickled spiders. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this one little thing here. And this is a bit of that spider, like the other ones that I drew that are in the recollections exhibit. And we're going to see if I can show you what it looks like under a microscope. So that little bit there looks like this. Oops, I'm going to try to shift. I'm sorry for all the flashing and everything there. It's probably not very pleasant to most of you.
There we go.
Sorry, I could have got the whole digital link here, but I didn't. So there's the spider bit. And it turns out that this microscope is set up to do drawings. And the way it does drawings is with a fairly old-fashioned method that actually gives you a double image. And this little light path here takes the page, and this light path here takes the spider, so that when I set it all up, I actually can see both my hands. I don't know if you can, whoops, can you see my hand there?
Yes.
So I actually then just take a pencil and I just trace. And that's how I do the drawing. And so I can actually get that. So I'm done with my phone here, so we can switch back to the computer. Nicole, can you wrangle the technology for that? Okay.
I think we're good. Thank you.
I think we're good. Okay, I'm good. There we go.
Yeah.
So that allows me to get a good drawing. And one of the reasons I do drawings, despite the digital age and digital photography, is that a drawing is really a chance to express my understanding, which a photograph doesn't necessarily do. So I get to emphasize certain lines or make sure that certain things are clear. And sometimes I'll even do something that isn't quite what I see, because if I turn the specimen or look at other specimens, I can get clarity that I can't get on the single specimen that I'm seeing. And then I'm drawing, therefore, is a full expression of my understanding of the specimen. So anyways, I spend a lot of time doing that. And what comes out is a new species description that says to the world, here's this new species, and this is what it looks like.
Well, and it's important to have that visual understanding of very minute structures, such as hairs that are on the legs or on the various appendages of different individuals, because those are part of the description of the species and can be very important in terms of how they fall on a particular leg or how many they are or clusters of them, that sort of thing. Is that not the case?
That's right. And so here's actually the specimen we were just looking at. I needed to look at it again. And the details there are sort of strange and incredible, but they're also very distinctive from species to species. And if we didn't look at this bit, if we just looked at the whole spider, it would be very difficult to tell apart the species, because if you just look at it from a distance, if you just take a photograph of it as it's hopping around, you might be able to say that let's put it this way, since people don't know these spiders, but they know, say, birds, it would be like saying, oh, we can tell it's a warbler, and we may be able to tell it's within this group of warblers, but we can't tell what species it is. With things like warblers, you usually can if you get to know the eye rings and all that stuff, right? But with the spiders, not. And so we need to be able to see these details to know what the species are, and therefore know, for instance, whether a particular habitat is the only habitat for a particular species. If we didn't have the good resolution of knowing the distinction between species, we might think that a habitat had nothing special in it because it has what looks like it exists somewhere else. But it may be that when we know the details, we know that is the only place for that particular species. So it can be important in conservation efforts, for instance, to really get to understand the distinctions between species.
Yes, absolutely. I completely understand, having looked at worms through microscopes, and I always have to keep in mind I need at least 3 characteristics of these worms that is showing them different from one species to another. Right. Like you say, it's easy to look at a spider and say it, or even a bird, and say it might be that particular one, but you need the detail to really clarify the difference, however similar 2 species might be. It's those tiny things that tell the difference, right?
That's exactly right. And the thing that we've learned over the past few hundred years is that biodiversity is incredibly detailed. Not only in every single species, like if you think about humans, for instance, we think about our hand, oh, that's an amazing thing, right? We're the only thing on Earth that has this hand. Well, this spider, the species, is the only thing on Earth that has that particular gizmo, right? And the same is true of every single species. They each has something unique. And so there's detail at that level, but there are so many species as well. And if we really want to get an understanding of all the parts that make up the Earth, we need to be looking at this sort of thing and figuring them out. So.
Exactly. So thinking of detail, I know that Lorax lapsias was a very interesting species that you ended up discovering. In fact, I think, didn't you do that in 2010? Was that in 2010 that was actually, or maybe that was the time that it was thrown out to the public to help you out? nonetheless, maybe you can tell us the background behind that species.
Background behind that. So this was a species found in fieldwork in Ecuador in South America. And I was looking especially for a group that had hardly been studied at all since about 1900. So a French arachnologist went over to Venezuela, found some cool things there, described them around 1900, and pretty much nobody touched the group since. And people thought that this group, which was a very distinctive group of jumping spiders, only lived in Venezuela. That's the only place it was known from. And so I started to find a few new ones in Ecuador of this group, but they weren't quite like the ones in Venezuela. And when I went to this one beautiful cloud forest in Western Ecuador, a site that's very well known by birders because of the amazing number of hummingbirds that it has, this one spider dropped on my sheet. And it's the sort of thing that you get to know these things a while, and you get to suddenly realize something's just happened, because when it fell on my sheet, the way it walked like members of this group. And I've learned this by collecting them and getting to know them and getting my eye attuned. And so it was like, before I even saw a full picture of what the thing looked like, I just, oh, it's one. And so then I looked at it more closely and I said, oh, this is the first one that's actually a member of the Venezuelan group that's been found outside of Venezuela.
I've lost some sound here. Why have we lost sound?
Hey, Sheila and Wayne. I'm still able to hear Wayne talking about it, so it might just be Sheila.
Are we all hearing sound here?
Sheila, I will let you know. So Wayne, why don't you keep going and I will fix Sheila's audio.
Can you hear, Sheila, can you hear Nicole? I'm not sure. Okay, I'll keep going and Nicole will sort things out there. Jump in, Sheila, when you can. So having found that thing and realizing that it was probably a new species, then I brought it back to the lab and confirmed that it was a new species. But we wanted to have a name for it. So when we discover a new species, that person who does the formal publication, announcing it to the world and indicating how it's distinct, gets to choose the species name. We often try to do it to honor somebody or to describe the species. And in this case, we thought this was a great opportunity, because it was part of Beaty research, for the public to get involved in choosing the name. And so we had a little contest where we told the story of how it was found and asked people, hey, do you have ideas for names? And there were some really great ideas for names. Some of them were funny, some of them were pretty expected, I suppose. But the one that really caught our eye was Lorax, after the Dr. Seuss character, because not only was this a sensitive ecosystem that deserves conservation focus, and so the Lorax's conservation focus was a perfect theme, but also this species, the males, and at that time we only knew the male, the female's been found since in Colombia, it turns out. The males have a little yellow mustache right underneath the eyes. And so we thought, oh, that's perfect. The Lorax has a yellow mustache, this does. So that gave us the opportunity to call it Lapsius lorax. So the Lapsius is the genus name that it already had. We knew it was going to be there. And the Lorax was then the name that completed the species name as Lapsius lorax.
Marvelous story. It really is. And it's so nice that it is connected to the Dr. Seuss book on the Lorax and talking about loss of biodiversity in that book, but also the whole idea of young people reading that book and then being able to understand that they too might be able to go somewhere and find a new species, or even if they don't find a new species, they make in-depth observations themselves so that they can better understand what individual species actually look like, because that really makes you more attentive to nature and more interested in nature and start to own it. Would you agree?
I think that that's a fantastic point. And it's important not only for the stewardship that we as humans have for nature, that we have a sense of ownership and connection, but also just the contributions to the science. You're quite right that anybody can contribute, that it's people think, oh, everything's already discovered. There are so many opportunities, and we see that in various citizen science projects. iNaturalist is a big deal nowadays. If people don't know that, check it out. But also you see it around the world in things like Facebook groups, where people in biodiverse areas, say tropical rainforest areas, are putting up their photographs saying, hey, what's this spider? I just saw this. And it turns out so many of them are discovering new species. You know, we say, oh my gosh, where did you find that? Right? And I don't think they realized what they could do, you know, that they had this opportunity to make a difference. So
exactly. Well, and if nothing else, it helps people even in their own homes start looking at the various things that at first they might have thought of as, oh, we should get rid of that. But hey, why not take a closer look and just learn a bit more about it?
And yeah, even species that are already known, there is so much that isn't known yet about them, because most of the species that that biologists have found, we've published. There's almost nothing known about them other than their existence.
Right.
So there's very little else known. So there's so many opportunities to learn about ecology, behavior, various things.
And even if we bring this kind of full circle back to the beginning when we were talking about the blue whale, there's still an awful lot not known about the behavior and where the blue whale goes, or even parts of its physiology, how it functions, that sort of thing. So a huge animal like that, we are still learning lots and lots about. Okay, if you had, was there anything else that you wanted to add there?
No, if there's anything with this, if Nicole's been looking at the chat, if there are any questions that she wants to relay, but.
Sure. I've got a couple comments and things. So one just about jumping spiders in the house. We had a couple comments asking about them and perhaps how beneficial they can be in your homes. Are spiders something that you can have in your home comfortably?
Well, in Canada, yes. Although, I mean, I suppose if you have a house that is on the beach in the Gulf Islands, there's a chance you might have a northern black widow wander in sometimes, but except for or maybe in the Okanagan, but except for those cases, which are not going to be very common, anything that's going to wander in your house is probably pretty safe, and certainly a jumping spider is. The ones that are in my house, the way I look at it is, well, if the spider wasn't there, what would be there? Because it's eaten some. So whatever it's eating, I think, well, you know, silverfish, they're probably eating the glue from my books. The, you know, fruit flies, they're being a pest on my fruit or whatever. So I just figure the spider's not doing me any harm, but the things that it eats probably are. So.
Awesome. Yeah. And another quick follow-up to that, what are the best places in Vancouver to see jumping spiders?
Oh, well, you know, the more natural habitat, the better in terms of diversity of jumping spiders. A really great place is Iona Beach. So open areas that have a fair bit of sun in a natural area is good. And Iona Beach, for instance, is open. And one of the things you can do is look at along the little ones hopping along the ground that is a little bit sandy but has short vegetation, because jumping spiders love the sun typically. They've got those gigantic eyes and they need high sunlight to be able to use them. So they're little sun-loving creatures. So someplace natural that's got sun on vegetation, on sandy ground, on, you know, on leaf litter in the forest and so forth. So each species has a specific place it likes to live.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Wayne. There are some really lovely positive comments in the chat about interesting and your drawing setup, which is incredible. How magical, Wayne and Sheila, great interactions with each other. And in the news, there was a 12-year-old who just found a juvenile hadrosaur skeleton in Horseshoe Canyon, which is amazing. So much to discover about biodiversity. So thank you so much, Sheila and Wayne, for having that chat with us today. I'm going to bring up my screen. Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm giving you a wave even though I don't have a video. It's such a habit. So thank you so much. And our next video clip is going to feature our community. The Beaty Biodiversity Museum runs programs for 11,000 people per year from K to 12, post-secondary, family, and adult groups. Over 180 active volunteers, including many undergraduate UBC students, support the museum every year through education and outreach and curation.
The museum also reaches out beyond its walls through online programming, rich educational resources, and our award-winning Beaty boxes, self-contained kits with real museum specimens that travel between schools and other institutions.
The Beaty Biodiversity Museum currently has over 300 members who are really engaged with the natural world. Through our online initiatives and social media channels, we can connect with a larger audience of over 10,000 online followers. As an agile institution, we are expanding our online engagement through weekly live streams, virtual tours, and online group programs.
The Beaty Biodiversity Museum has built a community that is facing the environmental challenges of today and promoting a healthier and more sustainable future.
Fabulous. So next we are joined by Dr. Quentin Kronk, who is the current director of the museum, as well as a curator in the herbarium, faculty at UBC. Thank you so much for joining us today, Quentin. Take it away.
Right. Well, thank you, Nicole, and thank you, everyone, for putting on this great celebration of our 10 years. And it's so nice to see Wayne here, because of course Wayne is the founding director of the museum. So Wayne, in a sense, was the midwife to this baby, and it falls to me to continue the process of bringing up what is now a 10-year-old. And it's a fantastic opportunity and challenge, and we've got so much that we can do and so much we can achieve. So I'd really like to thank everyone who's been involved in these 10 years for a really great contribution to the museum and to the future of biodiversity. So I think, Nicole, do you have any things that that you'd like me to talk about?
Well, maybe if you could talk about what you think the next 10 years are going to hold for us.
Yes, well, that's an interesting one. I think what we've got now is a really solid foundation to move forward. We've built in 10 years first-rate public programs, and we've also got our collections really well curated and in very good shape, and new collections are coming in. So where next? Well, I think one place for our public programming is the virtual world, because we're living in this terrible pandemic. But one thing that the pandemic has done for us as a museum is forced us to look to the virtual world to get our programming out, and it's been amazing. I mean, some of the things the team has been able to do and some of the programs we've been able to roll out, even when the museum was closed, has been amazing. And I think we can continue that. And really, when one thinks about the virtual world, the digital museum, there is no geographical limitation. We're not just in a particular place in the Pacific Northwest. We're potentially able to reach everyone throughout the world. So that's an enormous opportunity. The question is, how do we seize it? And how do we go forward to make this digital museum, which has a worldwide reach? And I think that's tremendously exciting. I also think in terms of our science, we've got this solid base of collection science, but how can we make that really impactful and go out into the world and do survey and inventory work in threatened ecosystems to help their conservation. And I would say those two things are huge opportunities for us, but great challenges as well. But there are many areas in which we can move forward, I think.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And yeah, reflecting on this last year in the context of the last 10, it's been very different, but I think that ultimately we've all been finding different ways to encourage biodiversity education and helping things be better understood, supporting research and teaching. So it has been a challenge, but it has definitely been a way to grow into all the corners of the globe, that's for sure. So any final remarks from you before I throw it to our last video clip?
Well, I would like to reiterate that it's been a team effort, and many people are volunteers, are frontline staff, greeting the public in the museum and interpreting the specimens, the people behind the scenes curating, and ensuring that we have built this great base to move forward. And I think it's a time of celebration for what we've achieved, but also a time to look forward to what we could achieve in the future. And if people have ideas about what we could and should do, please either put them in the chat now or send us an email and say what you would like to see the Beaty Biodiversity Museum engage with and do in the next 10 years.
Well, that's wonderful. And what a nice call to action for all of us to get active in biodiversity. So I'm going to bring up my screen one more time. And I just want to thank everybody, Quentin, Wayne, Sheila, Vincent, Dale behind the scenes, all of our front of house staff. Thank you all so much for helping to put today together. And thanks to all of you for celebrating with us today and for your support. I encourage you to share memories, thoughts, photos, anything you'd like on social media or in the chat to celebrate our birthday. That would be a great birthday present to hear from all of you. And I want to share a couple quick numbers because if you know me, I love numbers. So over the last decade, we've had over 3,400 groups and programs through our doors, 94,000 volunteer hours, 345,000 visitors, and just like it's been said before, over 2.1 million specimens. So to wrap up today, we'll show the final clip of our anniversary film celebrating our collections. Without the collections, we wouldn't exist. Here's to many decades more of helping to create a world where biodiversity is better understood, valued, and protected. Thank you.
The natural history collections of the Beaty Museum have been built up over the last century by generations of UBC scientists. Prior to the Beaty Museum pulling them all together into a common facility, the natural history collections of UBC were scattered around in different buildings and really accessible only to researchers.
The bryophyte and the lichen were open shelves and shoeboxes. The aisles were, stacked with little trays we built. So that is how proud that we got towards the end there.
The fish collection used to be down through an anteroom of a classroom, down some spiral staircases with lights hanging from wires, massive shelves tipping over and floods happening on a weekly basis, and just not the way you want to store natural history specimens.
By pulling together the collections into a common modern facility, UBC biologists were able not only to give them a better home for the long distant future, but also to make them visible to the public. The museum opened to the public on 16th of October 2010, and since then we've been happy to welcome hundreds of thousands of visitors and very proud to show them not only the specimens that are so critical to our museum, but also talk about the research that we at UBC do.
With the public being able to walk through our collections and see, in many cases, how collections are stored, you get a view into the back rooms of what's normally hidden from natural history collections. Bringing the 6 collections of the Beaty Biodiversity Museum together has facilitated bringing them together digitally as well.
So one of the best parts about our database is that it's comprehensive. It covers all the collections now. It's found all in one place, so you can easily find everything. It's made it broader and accessible for many different types of users with lots of images online ready to be used.
The modern facilities of the Beaty Biodiversity Museum allow us to prepare and protect the natural history specimens for the long term.